This week, we pick up where we left off in our interview with Dr. Myla Bui, discuss our honest fears, concerns, and hopes in the development and direction of artificial intelligence. If you hadn't had a chance yet, please go back and listen to part 1 of this interview, episode 100, where Dr. Bui brings us up to speed on the status of AI when we work through developing an overall philosophical foundation. I didn't see you there.
It all started early this morning.
From hunting ghosts to Bigfoot, UFOs, cryptids, true crime, paranormal, and more.
I've always wanted to see a UFO.
Oh, I was researching for your entertainment. That's Bigfoot's guy. He basically wrote the book on Monocle. We aren't really comedians. What if Buddha did cocaine? The Addams Family on meth. This is the Black Cat Report.
See you on the other side.
To kind of push us into another area is future space, right? We've been talking short term, we're talking a year, we're talking 2 years, AI. And we all know with technology, continuously runs and gets faster and faster and faster. So the more that we use AI, the quicker everything we're looking for is found, and it's just going to keep growing for us. The conscious of people don't see a physical version of AI right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no robot that's going out there walking the streets being like, "Hi, nice to meet you." Yeah. And for me, I think of this as why it's not such a big thing, because that's what all the movies predict. That's what, you see in Hollywood. You see Terminator, you see AI with Will Smith. In 10 years, do you think that's a reality, or do you think we're still going to be phasing in this, or will that ever come to pass? Do you think that'll be a thing?
I would like to think not, but I think that we will eventually come to a balance.
Yeah.
I do genuinely believe that. How fast, how far along those advances may have implications for us, we can't, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But I do think, the pendulum, the second it swings too far to one end, it's also going to swing back at about the same pace, right?
Yeah.
Back to the middle, because I believe in nature. And I believe that no matter how technologically advanced we might become, I have to believe as a human that is also looking to preserve her own existence, right?
Yeah.
And humanity's existence, that nature always will play a role in allowing for that balance in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that might look like, but I do believe that. We can go as far, right? We're very curious creatures. We're gonna take it as far as we want to take it. But then I would bet a whole dollar today. I would bet you a whole dollar the second that we get to that point, you're going to also have an army of humans that serves as the resistance, as you would see it, right? In those movies as well.
Yeah.
So nature will have a way, just like the market, of correcting itself. Nature will have a way of correcting itself. And it really has much to do with the fact that the way in which nature might correct itself it's in fact is going to be through humans determining at a certain point in time how relevant it is to actually protect the human species, right?
Let's just hope that we're still making the decisions and we haven't entrusted it to something else. In AI, as we get further, we haven't just gone okay, well, this is the fairest way to do it, because we've built AI so much, we've done so much research, pretty much making the world information, right? You guys talk about marketing and the idea behind it, and making the world each piece and measuring it, making that a measurable piece of information, right? And so let's hope at this point we don't decide one day, oh, we're not making the best decision, which we don't make the best decisions, but we're not making the best decisions. This thing that we've created that has all the information of all of technological advances, that it can make the best decision for us. And then the best decision for us is just goodbye. That's the end of the world for the idea behind movies and stuff like that.
Yes. So it's like Life 3.0 in many ways, right? If I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, right? Life 1.0 is essentially biological in nature, right? Life 2.0 is basically us creating machine. Life 3.0 is machine creating machine, right? And I think that that's where you're heading with this. And you're absolutely right. That has sat in the back of my mind for a while. It is one where it's not in the forefront of my mind, but it's definitely in the back of my mind.
Yeah, you don't want to think about it because it's not like
Yeah,
a great thing
right.
to think about every day. Like, whoops.
Yeah. But, trajectory wise, are we likely going to be capable of doing that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Then, that is, you take a look at prophecy, it does suggest to us that it is humanity that destroys humanity. Right. So, but yeah, you're essentially referring to Life 3.0. And I do believe that has the potential to become a reality. But I think that is why it is critical that we, as a human species, come together and create guidelines, ethical, responsible guidelines that are put in place to, and this, I'm not the biggest fan of regulation, right?
That's why we're friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? That in instances like this, it safeguards the human species. And I think that is going to be critical. Right. But once again, I'm speaking this way because I'm a human.
Yeah.
I'm speaking this way because,
It's okay to have that bias. You don't have to apologize. It's okay to be like, hey, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm human. Like, it's okay. It's you are good. All right. At least in our podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I want to say, though, that if the only way we're determining what's human is if you click Google and say, I am not a robot, like, we're
doing good.
Google can do that. The AI can do that now.
We got this, y'all.
We got it.
We are fine.
Yeah. We're there.
No, okay, so I want to... How do I put this? Okay, so for me, looking on to you, the educator, the person that's behind the scenes, is kind of, chatting with folks that I don't have access to in my day-to-day life and have regular text messages with, and Facebook and Instagram and emails, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have that type of rapport with folks that quite literally 100% do handle the direction of AI and how it's going to be unleashed on humanity. Like, I don't have any of that access. You, on the other hand, do actually talk to folks that do have connections and are involved with what the fuck we're going to see in the next 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years. You talk to them 100%. So I would consider you an insider in a good way. And, but I got to ask, if news headlines came across your feed while you're scrolling, or popped into the newsletters that always end up in your inbox, or a friend sent you something, right? However the hell the information got to you. If there were warning signs, however you define them, all right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I'm ready for this. No, but if there were warning signs for you, that when you were going and you were seeing the headlines, what breakthroughs, announcements, political or social decisions, right, would be behind a moment where you would find yourself kind of stepping back and saying, fuck?
Oh, well.
Like, what would cause you to pack your bags, grab your kids, and head off to the hills?
So, to be honest, I had that moment. I actually had that moment, believe it or not, in 2018.
Holy fuck.
Wow.
How have we been friends this long and you're just now telling me this?
I actually had that moment in 2018. And this is before even the advances of artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence only expedited what I saw. It had everything to do with the fact that it was grant research that allowed me access into the behind the scenes of your biggest tech companies in the world.
Yeah.
And I was able to see the products that they were testing and, that were in the plans for like the next 30 years.
Oh, shit.
So when I got a chance to see that technology, right?
Yeah.
To be immersed in that technology and to see what it can do and to see how it changes the way that we live on a day-to-day basis. It changes the way in which we learn. It changes the way in which we work. It changes the way in which we interact with our loved ones even, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was my moment,
Yeah.
right? When I was allowed access to that space, right? That environment, to be in it, to see what it was like. And already back in 2018 was when I realized that we have a problem. And that, in many ways, it was after getting that level of access that inspired my path in doing research in the innovation emerging technology space. But mind you, one does not come to a level of awareness and, or for lack of a better term, actualization unless one continues to ask questions in other spheres because it's all interrelated.
Yeah.
So since 2018, my research really went through a transformational process because I went from the emotions, well-being, health, science space to one that intersected with obviously technology, but then understanding technology and the intersectionality between how it is that we as humans interact with technology. You also have to not just understand the advances of where innovation might be headed, you also have to understand us as humans. You have to understand us from a psychological standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, anthropological standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from a neuroscience. So that is why my work has its fingerprints in all of those spaces because everything is connected.
Yeah.
So I can't sit here and say that, it's one set of experiences that I saw. No, it is one set of experience that prompted further questioning and curiosity that was sparked, that also then allowed a framework that ultimately ended up being developed based upon the curiosity that I have.
Yeah.
And based upon my wanting and my desire to understand.
Yeah.
Right? So to answer your question in short, that already happened since 2018.
In 2018, you had access to enough data and enough trajectory wishes. They were pipe dreams of large industries that are not just influential, but quite literally run and have legal policy around guardrails for them.
Correct.
Because they are so important to how society operates. You had access to their data and what they would like to do. Girl, you can't throw a carrot out and not have me ask all the questions that I know you can't answer. So I'm going to try to formulate this in the best possible way because I'm sure contracts still apply and you are a professional and you do kick ass at all the things that you do. I'm not worried about that. So correct me and define my guardrails in this way. And I don't want to push you too hard in a way that you're uncomfortable with. So please just tell me. First question is, what the fuck did you see? But I know you can't answer that. I'm starting in subtle. No,
best way I can put it, right? Because I can't give you the details.
Of course.
I can't go into the details, right? But at a very macro level, the way in which we will live, the way in which we will interact with one another and with machines, it is not one that is going to be conducive to our overall well-being.
This is what goes back to you talking about being old school and you talking about feeling privileged in the past. Let me ask, did that define that moment for you where it made you recognize the importance of those things and for you to look back and say, I was privileged in my youth?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, it did that, but no, it didn't do that for me straight away. It sparked the curiosity. However, I don't think, at least in my experience, one just doesn't see what you see and you're like, let me drop everything and let me turn my world upside down.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen overnight, right? What that does is it sparks a certain level of curiosity where you're going to start to inquire. And the second you start asking questions and you discover answers, those answers also lead to other questions.
You're filtering every single moment afterwards through the lens of the potential bias that you've just been exposed to. So now you're watching family gather around for Thanksgiving dinner, and it suddenly, just randomly, for no fucking reason, pops up in your head, and you're measuring that experience through what you know is coming down the line, and that affects the development of your moral direction. Is that what you're getting at?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So that's why I said to your question, yes and no.
Gotcha.
And we also have to understand, as humans, we're only able, like, if I'm going to have a conversation, with you, Gil, or if I'm going to have a conversation with you, Joey, I'm only going to be able to meet you at where you are, right? Like, I can't meet you where, you need another 6 months or another year of exposure and or experience.
How many relationships could have been better if that was an option? I'm just saying. Sorry, you gave me an in. Sorry, keep going.
Right? So that's what I mean. 2018, I just was not at the level of experience and or maturity as of yet, as I am today. Right?
Yeah.
So it can only meet me at where I was in my life, right? In terms of exposure and experience. So it required time. It required time for me to ask the questions. It required time for me to read, to learn, right? To give myself exposure, to design studies and test, right? And retest, right? Because I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
So it requires time to get to that point where you grow that appreciation for what is actually simple and understand what privilege truly is, not how privilege is defined by society and the market, right? How you define what privilege actually is. And I think that I only came, to this level of understanding because 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, I'll be very different, right? So that's why, it didn't come overnight. It only sparked a certain level of curiosity in an area that is so incredibly interconnected with all else. And that wasn't something that I had realized at the time. And to also, be clear too, because I can't give myself any credit for this path, right?
Yeah.
It only happened to me by mere coincidence. Right? Like, a lot of things we try to plan for, most things we try to plan for, but it is often what we don't expect and what it is that we don't plan for that we are exposed to that has the potential in many ways to transform us far faster than we had ever imagined relative to what it is that we had planned.
The apple falling on our head while we're thinking about physics.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So in many ways, it's one where, like, I can't tell you that I had planned all this and
no.
a priori, like, no, these are circumstances that happened along the way. I think that so much knowledge that I have required to this point in time has more so to do with my own sense of curiosity, my own, I'm like a pit bull, right? Like if once I have once I'm curious about something and I don't understand it, I bite down like a pit bull and I just will not let go. And I will annoy every single person that passes me by that I think might be able to provide some insight into what it is that I'm curious about. And I think that, that is the crux of how I've evolved. And so it really goes back to, once again, the implications for how artificial intelligence might be designed. One of the things I'm curious about is how might artificial intelligence be designed in such a way that sparks curiosity?
I love that.
There are different forms of curiosity. There's diversive curiosity versus epistemic curiosity, right? Diversive curiosity really refers to when we see something that sparks an interest, but we don't necessarily go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Versus when you're dealing with epistemic curiosity, that is when you transition from, that diverse form of curiosity to where you start questioning and digging and digging and digging, right? And I think that we as humans, this is an area that warrants attention in how we go to design artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
But I think that before I can even get to that question, we as a society will have to come to a point where, I hate to say this, there are enough challenges that make life difficult with regards to artificial intelligence that will then cue us on how we design artificial intelligence to spark epistemic forms of curiosity. But that is, in many ways, if we take a look at the stages, that's like step 2. Step 1 is going to require the cue. What is it that is actually going to cue these conversations? And more often than not, it is going to be when Joey's flash shows up, right? When the actual symptoms and the side effects show up.
Step 1 is fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
I do also want to share too that I feel like I had a similar experience, not with just AI, but with the way that the future is going and how it affects. Because you always talk about like emotional health, especially, which I love because that is a huge thing. The emotional health of the people that are dealing with this stuff, especially with young children that are coming up that are, 5, 6, that are literally staring at screens all day, feeling this stuff, AI feeding information, especially algorithms of like what's next to watch, what's the new thing. And that's feeding them all this information. I was thinking that when I was in Mexico, there was this, I was with a few friends, and a friend of mine was sitting at a table with us, and there's this girl sitting at a table on her computer, just typing away, doing stuff. And the friend of mine asked her, he's like, hey, so like, what are you doing? Like, you're on your computer, you're just sitting there chilling. Like, what are you creating? And she says, well, I'm actually creating a digital VR shop space. So basically, you could put on an Oculus, you could put on something, and she was designing the whole creative shop. So that when you put on this VR, you go into this space and you react with people that are there, basically doing what we do in real life, but in a VR space. And to think about how, when we talk about AI and how maybe 10 years ago, to think about how we still go in the shop space and the mall was just like this, still a compatible thing. Would that be good to say? It was still a thing. And malls, nowadays when nobody really goes to malls. Malls don't happen. You order on Amazon. So thinking about the idea that we're literally taking that idea of a mall and we're just creating it in a virtual space. It really affected me kind of similar way, because then you're like, we are literally detaching ourselves from this physical space we're in and putting us in a mental space, and to me, that's like a huge thing, because I love the idea of being here, and I think that that's the mental and emotional health that you talk about, is that people detaching themselves, it's going to detach into another place,
You bring up some really good points there. If we take a look at both history as well as research, in the social media space, for example, what we have found is that while social media is a space that allows for connectivity, it is not necessarily the best space that allows for the continual bonding of relationships to happen. Rather, what effectively works more so is the case where social media, right? These social media platforms allow for people to meet, but the social interaction and the depth of the relationship is often built outside. So there has to be social platforms that are physical in setting that allows them to meet and interact, that then sustains that relationship and it deepens that relationship. But without that partnership, without that alternative of the physical space, then that relationship and that bond is rather superficial. So that is when we take a look at the research literature and where we are with social media. When we take a look at virtual reality, even with what Meta was trying to pursue 2022, 2023, that in many ways tanked their stock. had a lot to do with Zuckerberg investing so heavily in building out that virtual reality space. But notice he took a lot of heat for that. Their stock fell tremendously. And then finally, he took a step back. Now, take a look at Second Life, right? With what Meta was trying to do is not that much different from Second Life, right? Second Life, what did they learn as to why it is that it did not work? They learned that, yes, you have a niche group of consumers that are going to buy into that space, okay? Sure. But ultimately, if relationships and bonds are not sustainable because we are social animals, then eventually it becomes obsolete in many ways. Or if not obsolete, it's not one where you're going to be able to pull in a mass population, right, to sustain it and for it to scale. And so the reality is that I do feel that because we are hardwired as social animals that seek depth in relationships, if the frameworks that are set up in our society, technologically speaking, for example, right, in artificial intelligence, does not satisfy that basic human level, right, requirement of depth in the relationship, it also does not have the ability to scale, right? We saw it with Second Life. You know, Zuckerberg was attempting that as well, right? And I'm not going to say that it can't be successful. I'm just saying that we have not come to a point in our history where we have been able to satisfy those underlying factors that are human in nature yet through these frameworks. Now, if we take a look at chatbots and whatnot that are being utilized now, you know, particularly amongst, for example, nursing homes, right? Because older people, you know, there aren't enough people that visit them. You know, are chatbots effective, right, in facilitating some type of social interaction? Yes, and probably no. I don't know, right? Like, I can't really speak to that as of yet. And Gil, chime on in, because that's where, you know, I would say I would need more insight. Yes.
I'm raising my hand, teacher. My father passed away last year around this time. It was around mid-July. And so my mom, you know, like recent widow, you know, in her mid to late 60s, having to adapt after decades and decades to being like, shit, I'm on my own, you know, like, you know, children are out of the house, husband is no longer here. She completely unprompted. At one point, I remember like my jaw dropped when she said this. We were talking about something, and she just randomly said, she's like, you know, if I had a little robot around the house and it was talking to me and it was da 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 and this and that and the other, I'd be really happy with that. I'd be excited. Okay, I was probably talking about UFOs 5 seconds before that, or like, you know, a chili recipe or some random ass shit. I did not prompt this conversation, and it has stood out to me for almost a year now. I wish I could send her a link to an Amazon shopping option where that would happen. Like, it was so incredibly human. Let me just put it that way. I really, you know, after a year of processing it, thinking about it, and this and that and the other, at the end of the day, it was so incredibly human. Her reasons and her rationale and the way that she described the need. It was honest. That's what I really have to fucking say. It was very honest. Sorry to stop your flow, just to encourage you to keep flowing.
No. Yeah, I mean, once again, like we're seeing this in nursing homes, right? You're seeing a greater and greater demand for this. There's reason why this has the ability to scale. And that's why from the get-go, this is not a one-sided coin. If you take a look at ChatGPT 4.0, it now has the ability to become even more and more conversational. And it's only going to advance that much more so. And it's purposefully designed in such a way where it's no longer just generative, right? There's that conversational component that is going to be critical in its ability to scale. It's going to be critical. So we already know that resources are being allocated and or reallocated into developing and designing artificial intelligence to serve that purpose. And that is what it is that will make it that much more attractive, sustainable, and scalable over time, right? So there's good and bad It's the choice. Like I said, it's a mirror. It's a reflection of us.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's not all fairy tales and rainbows, and like AI is being built, it's the bias behind it. If it's the mirror that you talk about, that's like there's going to be problems. And I want to say thank you for coming on the show, because I think a lot of people don't understand that it's just like any other tech. We're going to be filtering through this. The problems are going to be found eventually, like people are paid to do this, to figure this out, which is relieving to hear. And especially people that are guiding some direction of where it's going. It's relieving to hear. And I think for a lot of people that don't understand AI and don't understand how it goes, they just watch movies, watch or see the news where it's like AI is going to kill us all and stuff like that. It's refreshing, I'm sure, to hear that somebody is not just looking at the how much money are we making, how much, obviously that's a component in it, because capitalist society, but is looking at the ethics behind it, looking at the morality, and that's such a healthy, great thing to understand and know that it's not just all about the end game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. 2 points here. To your first point, yes, we're going to discover the problems along the way, especially in the beginning. But I think that, once again, it's also really important that we understand that the problem is actually us, right?
Yep.
The problem is actually us. That's the first point. Second point, as we go to stumble upon these challenges, there is going to be a natural tendency to look for guardrails. And sometimes it takes a couple of accidents before we can discover exactly where those guardrails are going to be needed. And while there are not many researchers in this space, I do feel that there is enough curiosity in this space that might spark further, research across the sectors, right? Like, I only come from the marketing space. I operate from a research standpoint from that space. But once again, note that what inspires the questions that I have, what inspires what I end up discovering, doesn't necessarily come from the research space alone. And I do think that we are also, from an organizational standpoint, we have moved to a time where we are expected to be able to multitask naturally. Like, we wouldn't be able to keep the jobs and the careers that we have if we only flew solo in one space. Like, that's unrealistic with where we are in the world and in business.
Yeah.
And so I do think that somehow, I believe that we eventually will come to a time where interdisciplinary will not be as challenging as it is before, because the way in which society, the way in which business, the way in which education is transforming due to advances in innovation is already setting the stage for that.
Yeah.
Like, the incentives that are in place are already there, because actually, if it's not incentives, it's punishment. Like, you're just not going to be able to hold a job if you can't do multiple different things. Like, you just can't.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even incentivized. You're going to be punished.
It's like a moving from simplicity to complication to simplicity again. Isn't that funny? Like, at the end of the day, you get punished as the world becomes more complicated for not learning how to simplify. And the next generation learns how to simplify even further, and we rely on that simplification within the complication. But the end goal is simplicity, depending on where you're at in that life cycle.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, where are you in that life cycle? But that pendulum continues to naturally swing, right? It's nature. I think it's nature at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So nature over AI is the biggest. This is where we're coming into this, and I love it. Well, it's the same thing in life, You think about when you're young, you try to make everything complex. You start out simple, obviously. Like, you're young, you're just doing whatever. You're not really thinking about a lot. You're kind of going to school, and really, I don't think I really thought about my own future when I was young. I was just like, oh, let's just have fun. Let's do stuff. And then you get to college and you start going, oh, I got to make life complex.
Bills suck.
Bills are terrible. I got to do this. I got to do that. So everything becomes complex. You're trying to figure out how to go about things. You slowly get along with your life. And as you get older, you start understanding, dang, it's better if it's simple.
Yeah.
It's so much better if it's simple. And like that's the way you're talking about it too, is like the regulations in the same way, is that life works along the same path. It's a mirror.
Simplicity that opens up to complexity to validate simplicity over and over and over again.
Gil, at the end of the day, that's what we as humans require. That's a part of the human experience.
100%.
Yeah.
We are at the over 2-hour mark of just recording. I'm not trying to keep you forever. I know this is one of your free nights out without your kiddos. Thank you. Thank you for all this time.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We loved it.
Likewise. I love having, these conversations. Believe it or not, I don't often get folks from outside of my world that asks, me these sorts of questions. And I love that, you guys are down with the obscure. You're down with going off the deep end. It makes the conversations very real. And I think that hopefully what it is that we talk about today is relatable to your audience. And I do hope that it also sparks some curiosity and also inspires the questions that they might ask as well. And you never know. These might be some of the seeds that plant paths for contribution in the future among your own audience. So I thank you for the opportunity, to be here tonight and have this fantastic conversation, with two awesome gentlemen that are clearly brilliant. I loved your questions. I love how
I've got more.
you got more.
I've got more. I'm not trying to keep you forever. I know this is one of your free nights out without your kiddos. And you're like, bro, I'm trying to hit the club. What are you doing?
You got places to be.
I'm ready to run these streets, Gil. Yeah, right. This is way past my bedtime.